go now. Into the tunnel of love.
What are we doing on time?
Traffic's a mess, but if we take the tunnel, we'll just make it.
The tunnel, which runs under 24 feet of riverbed and 72 feet of water, it's deep, was completed in 1926.
Guy's a genius. Right into the tunnel.
Oh, we got a live one here.
It was the kind of film that I thought was really unique because it would fall under, I suppose, a psychological adventure film.
Can anybody hear me? Is anybody out there? Oh, God, we've got fatalities down here!
I'm gonna try to find you some help.
Help! You are help! You're our help!
There weren't any bad guys. It was just the elements of nature working against the indomitable spirit of survivors.
Where are the rest? Someone come in and work.
There's no rest!
We're gonna drown down here, and he's all we've got!
I'm all you got. Why don't you meet me halfway?
I was up at my winter resort place, my ranch up near Lake Tahoe, and the script came, and it was called Daylight. And I'd almost died in the Copley Plaza fire in Boston in 1979. And one of the most horrifying images was the wallpaper of the bedroom started to peel off the wall like that. And I used that image when the tiles start ripping off the wall. When I could see the flames, I got out. The window was a double hung window. And then, like a miracle, these hook and ladders came around, Boston Fire Department, and they sent one ladder to me. I remember swinging and smacking in and, you know, like getting a second handhold and then getting a foothold. And then I started to go down. And that guy was scrambling up to me as fast as he could, and we met about the 6th story. And as we met, the window exploded, and all I remember is he threw himself over me.
Roll, 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 roll! Get over here!
I never knew who that guy was. I never saw his face. I didn't know his name. And I began thinking about all these firemen, all these emergency medical service workers. So I thought, you know, maybe this movie could be like a payback to men and women who do this, make our society better, contribute, risk their lives in these horrible disaster situations.
I think that would be diminishing the actual intent of the film to say that it was, quote, an action film, because it's not a chase film, it's not about guns and bullets, it's about the internal combustion of fear and trying to suppress it and overcome it.
Sylvester Stallone. Everybody agreed that he was, of the major stars, he would be the perfect guy because he has a persona of Rocky, of a guy from the neighborhood. He's exactly the kind of guy that goes into these kind of services, his persona.
If you want to buy some time, you gotta blow the tunnel shut. What are you doing here, kid? You're not part of this. I know that, but just listen to me.
It's a man who really has to get by on his wits, suppress his fear, and try to instill in the people around him some kind of sense of survival, some sense of pride, some ability to try to overcome these insurmountable odds.
So I called Sly and I said, I got this script. I don't know if you'll like it, but I think it's like a worthy successor to Cliffhanger. I think all the things you did in Cliffhanger about heights, it's got other things. It's about claustrophobia and the fear of drowning in an enclosed space. You're not a life taker, you're a life saver. And if that sounds intriguing to you, read it. He says, well, I hate being wet, I hate being on sets, I hate the dark, I don't like small places, I have claustrophobia. And I said, good, because I remember that you were afraid of heights, and one of the reasons you did cliffhangers, you want to conquer your fears. Here's a whole bunch of new fears to conquer.
I'd say that Rob has been instrumental in trying to support what I've been trying to do for a while, because he wanted a very naturalistic character. He wanted to have a person that I am somewhat in my private life to be on camera. He didn't want it to be about muscles, so he was insistent that the shirt would stay on, insistent that it would be about swaying people verbally rather than physically trying to maneuver them into position. So he had a vision, and when it became too Rambo-esque or ferocious or fierce, he would call for a retake and settle down, settle down. So he was very important.
I thought it behooved us to cast a group of talented actors who were not particularly well known to the public. So I set about casting a dozen real-life kind of actors. And to that end, there are great character men like J.O. Sanders playing Stephen, who I had worked with in the past on television, and I felt that Stallone needed a large physical antagonist who had real motivations to be as edgy as he was, because he had his daughter.
Another explosion? That's your idea down here? No wonder you got people killed.
Steven?
If anyone has a better idea, now's the time to tell me, do you?
You don't know what kind of damage this substructure's already sustained. So how do you know you can contain it to one section?
And Karen Young's character is the mother. You know, the arcs were to cross. She looked strong and reasonable, but as the movie goes on, she becomes completely paralyzed and hopeless.
False hope and now no hope. You've given us both. Thanks for nothing. Thanks for nothing! Sarah. I can't stand this shit.
In terms of the older couple, Colin Fox is a fine Canadian actor, very dignified, and exactly what I wanted Roger to be. Terminally polite, considerate, and Claire Bloom as his wife, obviously a wonderful, wonderful actress.
I can't lose.
Ellie.
I can't.
Ellie, no.
It was Jonathan's dog.
Look, Eleanor, listen to me. Listen to me. We can't bring them back. They're both gone.
I loved Viggo Mortensen in Crimson Tide as Weps. I thought he was so stunning, so handsome, but just such a powerful screen presence as an actor.
Man, I know you.
Roy Norton.
Oh, no,
How you doing?
George Terrell. I got a pair of your shoes.
Good, good. You like them?
Yeah, man, they're great. I wear them on Saturdays on my day off.
Bet you wish it was Saturday now, huh?
Then I needed an anchor of sheer humanity, of tremendous warmth, and to play George the Tunnel Cop. And long ago, when I was producing the movie The Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars, a young Afro-American actor came in to play the Jackie Robinson part, and we gave him the part, and his name was Stan Shaw. And I felt that Stan would break your heart and also, again, be a humanistic glue to keep the group of dissident survivors together.
Listen, I'm gonna make one last sweep with this tunnel, just in case he's right. You keep trying to get somebody on the other end of this thing. Take it.
Rob, who is a great visionary, and he's the type of person who listens intently and doesn't try to embarrass an actress or another actor or treat one level of actors differently than he treats another. He's very accessible, and he directs through his talent and not with ego. He doesn't play games with that, so it's very rewarding to work with him.
Then it got down to like the kids on the bus who were on their way to the work farm, you know, for the juvenile offenders. And I had seen Renely Santiago in Dangerous Minds and thought he was one of the most dynamic young actors around. And Trina Davis came in and read as LaTanya and just ripped up the screen. Marcella Thefford, also from Dangerous Minds. And originally there was a fourth ethnic cast role, written role, and I really was talking it over with Sly, and I said, you know, I really think one of these guys ought to be white. And he said, well, my son is a good actor. He was in Rocky V. And I called Sage in, and I met this charming, sweet, very, very vulnerable and soft-spoken young man. And I gave the part to Sage because he earned it.
Sage made me very nervous because I said, oh my God, here's my own flesh and blood in here, and he's playing a character that's other than my son, and I was very worried about it. But he had a sense of humor about it. The first day he came in, I think he cut himself and hurt himself, and I said, welcome to action. And from that day on, he was great.
Working with him, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun because he's, man, I don't know how many times, but this guy cracks joke after joke after joke. It's so hard to get in character. Or when you're around him, you know, he's like, hey, you cannot get in character. He can just snap in like that because he's had, you know, 30 years of experience. You know, he's been doing it forever.
I'd seen Amy Brenneman on the first year of NYPD Blue, and she's beautiful, but she's beautiful in a real way.
I thought that the key to this movie was having extraordinarily adept actors that had their own personalities, and Amy brought a kind of intelligence and freshness to it.
What attracted me to the part was the idea of working on a film of this scale with somebody like Stallone and with somebody like Rob, who I felt was very interested in having me have a full-fledged character. So it was sort of the best of both worlds.
We spent 9 months getting here. We're going to spend the next 108 days making it real. So I'm really proud to be with you all. We're now one group, one family, going out to make this picture.
And action!
In a sense, the tunnel is like a giant alien in that it has swallowed these people, but now it's trying to digest them.
It's the exact replica of one of the more famous tunnels in New York. It's been painstakingly researched down to the tiles, and the fact that it's been built to handle an ocean of water and the cave-ins, this tunnel is really a miracle of engineering. I've never seen a set like it.
I scouted every possible place in the world to make this movie. Originally, I wanted to go back to Eastern Europe because I knew I could make the movie cheaper there. But Sly didn't really want to go to Eastern Europe, so we tried England, we tried North Carolina, South Carolina, lots of Florida. And it turned out that Cinecittà in Rome was the best suited place because it had this very big backlot, completely flat, where we built 1/5 of a mile of the tunnel. And next to it was this tank, which was perfect for us as a water reservoir when we needed to do the flood scenes. And Cinecittà also has 16 stages, of which I think 9 have tanks. So they were really well equipped to do a water movie, which is what this ultimately was, you know. So it turned out that we ended up in Cinecittà, and it worked very well. The most difficult thing was to build this section of tunnel in such a way that we could use one, otherwise we would have probably had to build 2, because there's so many things that have to happen. And I think we had something like 7 or 8 revamps where we had to move the crew out, change the tunnel to the next stage, and move it back in.
I said to my production designer, Benjamin Fernandez, we have to think of this tunnel as one long alimentary canal, one long digestive tract of some beast. So Benjamin basically had to create an entire world of the tunnel mouths, the plazas, the road beds. We built up on top of Cinecittà, and with Illusion Arts, Sid Dutton and Bill Taylor, we made the mats that brought the Hudson River, the boats, the helicopters, the New Jersey shore, the mid-river buildings, all that was added.
What happens, and it almost happened in the late 40s, is there's a collision in the tunnel. One truck is carrying toxic waste, which happens all the time illegally. And then there's another person who is trying to escape from the police. There's an accident that happens. The truck is hit from behind by the 2 perpetrators. A fireball occurs, and then it seeks air. So the tunnel becomes like a gun barrel, and it rolls over all these hapless victims, microwaving its way to the very end of the tunnel, where it causes a collapse. And there's no way into this tunnel. Basically, these people have been sealed and buried alive.
The first step I did was, as always with these complicated sequences, I got with Nikita Natz, my storyboard artist, and I began to storyboard and graph where each survivor was going to be, who was going to go into the tunnel in which sequence, where were they going to be when the fire happened. But once you get it down to a sequence of 100 shots, and you know you're going to try to make it like a 2-minute sequence, a very long explosion, not your typical movie explosion, it became much more complex and needed the combined input of Kit West, my on-set effects supervisor, of Scott Farrar and Joe Lettieri from ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, who would work with me on all the CG fire. And Grant McCune, perhaps the greatest model builder in the world, and Sid Dutton and Bill Taylor, who also would have enormous amount of computer work to do, as well as the miniature photography and some blue screen elements to be involved with. And to bring Illusion Arts, ILM, Grant McCune Design, and Kit West Effects, and me into a committee that began to relentlessly pick apart each board, how it could be done safely.
There's a tremendous amount of live action cuts within that opening sequence, and a lot of it has obviously enhanced fire elements on it. But they started with our material, with our live action material, and then if it needed more fire, then the CGI guys would enhance it. The main explosion which comes out through the entrance to the tunnel was all done full size and real. A lot of people have said to me that, you know, that must have been modelled in CGI fire, and it wasn't. We did that for real. We built the whole entrance slightly away from the tunnel set, but we built the entrance to the tunnel, and we actually exploded everything out onto the oncoming cars that were coming down the ramp to go into the tunnel.
I actually went over to Rome for about a week just to talk with Rob. I didn't know much about the picture at that point, so I read the script on the plane, went over and did artwork and storyboards myself and Claudia Mullally.
Rob had a really specific idea of what he wanted that blast to look like. He didn't just want a typical pyro flame blast. He wanted a rolling, hungry, violent flame that came down that tunnel.
The anatomy that I came up with was that it had 3 parts. It had what we called the leading edge, which in my mind was like a rototiller. It was looking for oxygen, and when it impacted a solid object, it was like a plunger. And the mass behind the leading edge was the fireball, and that was a whole other set of colors and animation. It had less black, it was more red-yellow, whereas the front leading edge was more deep orange, black and orange, red, saturated colors. And the third element was what I called the plasma, which was when this leading edge and fireball had passed by, the air was so superheated that it actually liquefied like the surface of the sun.
Talking to him and getting his input, we were able to do some Photoshop composite artwork using photographs of the backgrounds and later some of the plates.
Shots that Rob worried about were things like Amy inside the car. One fellow's idea was to take a flamethrower and just blast it against the windshield. And he said, that's not a good idea. What if something happens to Amy? Not good. So instead I said, well, let's just do colored light, interactive light in the tunnel, photograph her, and let's composite all the flame in after the fact so it's safer at least, and we can achieve the same thing. And so Rob immediately liked that. Grant McCune at that time had been hired to do all the miniatures, especially for the toxic truck sequence where the explosion first occurs and the trucks get blown up and different cars get tossed about.
We brought back pretty well documented photography of all of the aspects of the tunnel. When we finished the construction and were getting ready to shoot, Rob and Raffaella came here to see it, and Raffaella actually looked down the tunnel and said, why did we build all that in Rome? Right? So it was pretty actual. And I found that in experience building miniatures that once you get rid of the idea of the distance and the size, that you can really sell them quite easily as long as they're painted right and detailed correctly.
The funny thing was, we were photographing in the full-size tunnel, a quarter-scale color tunnel in Los Angeles with Grant, and yet again another quarter-scale tunnel back here at ILM that was all in black, so that we could photograph flames against black and use the shapes of cars that were exact copies of the cars that Grant was using, or copies of the full live-action set cars, and wrap flame around those and have them all fit so that we could composite flame over either the miniature background or the live-action background.
We did lots of takes. Yeah, I think we ended up using over like 300 gallons of kerosene, and it held up pretty good. I mean, eventually the tunnel would have deteriorated to the point where we would have had to re-fireproof or whatever.
So it was a curious mixture of animation, live action, miniature, and lots of CG tricks.
That tunnel is sealed from both ends. I mean, the mid-river here is like hanging, like pickup sticks. Now, what the hell's the way in, huh?
The fan sequence, so that was a major mechanical set. We had one fan which was vertical, and then the 3 horizontal ones. That we built entirely from scratch. We powered them with hydraulic motors, and they all had a friction braking system. So I had people on the motors, and I had people on the brakes, so that if slightest problem, we could stop those fans within 6 inches.
Well, originally I thought the fans were just going to be done almost through computer generation. When I showed up and they'd actually built these fans, I couldn't believe the enormity of them. And I also couldn't believe the fact they said, we need you to go through them. I said, okay, and then the stuntman will take over. But when I went through the first fan, the blade hit me so hard, it like pounded me against this pillar, against the wall, and I said, oh my God, now this is going to be a very dangerous situation. But once I got into the fans, I don't know, there was a sense of trying to ride it all the way to the end.
In that reel of the fans, there were over 1,000 sound effects units for that 3-minute sequence. You don't want this to become like just a movie moment. I wanted the audience to be with Sly in this environment and feel what it must feel like to be overwhelmed in a Cuisinart that's 18 feet in diameter and 16 stories high. And to this end, Richard Anderson, the sound designer, and I worked to create a whole language of ambiances, as if the stomach was constantly rumbling.
All the pieces of the floor were on hydraulic rams. So as you see Stan Shaw sort of waving to say, this is a way out, or we've found something, the pieces start to lift up and the car slides down and catches him in the back. He didn't have a stuntman at all there. He did all his stunts himself there.
It was very challenging physically. I almost drowned. It was shot with me pinned under the front wheel of the truck, actually.
We had the car on the ram so we could take it backwards and forwards, and then we would put him in position and lower the car over him.
It'll keep you alive. Breathe through this one. Please, please. Come on. Steady breath. Breathe.
The first time we actually tried it, there was so much water rushing in, I couldn't breathe because every way I tried to catch air from water was coming in that direction at different times. And at one point I had to stop everybody and get situated where I can stop a certain flow from one angle to come at a different angle so I can have time to think and time to breathe.
The tunnel actually took on this horrible, demonic, unforgiving attitude. It was like torturing us piece by piece, inch by inch, and swallowing characters. And to me, it was like this beast. So by the end of it, I figured I had found its heart. You know, if you're going to take me, I'm going to take you. We're all going to go together. And it became kind of like this suicide pact.
You should have killed me! Because I found your heart! I found your heart! I don't blow out your body!
Having, early in the production, gotten a handle on how we were going to do the explosion, which is one of the big premises of the film, the second part was the concluding premise, which was the idea of the real-life phenomenon called the blowout.
A blowout? I really hate the way that sounds.
And I had read in a New Yorker article, in the New Yorker magazine, that they had a blowout, and there was this guy, Marshall Mabey, who was a sand hog, which is a nickname for a tunnel builder in the trade. And Marshall Mabey got blown out of the IRT tunnel under the East River, went through 30 feet of riverbed, through the entire East River, up 50 feet in the air, plunged back down into the East River, and lived.
We gotta try it! What? A blowout! Come on!
Well, this is all fun to think up, and it's all fun to write, but I can assure you it's a nightmare to try to put on film. So I turned once again to the great talents of ILM. What we wanted to do was essentially take an old technique, which they used to use for terrible old, fashion movies, which was called dry for wet.
We decided to do most of the sequence dry for wet because we thought it would be too dangerous to work with the actors that deep underwater for such a long period of time. In this first shot, we decided to hang the camera from bungee cords to give us a little bit of flotation. Rob Cohen came up with the technique of using little bits of spinach that really looked like gut that was just floating around. And so we adapted that technique and created little bits of spinach in CG. We had to do a pretty dangerous stunt where we had Sly underneath a ton of this kind of dirt and mud and needed to pull him through it. So it was the kind of thing where we only had one take to get the shot, And we saved it for last because we wanted to make sure we really knew how to get the underwater look the way we wanted. We had shot Amy against a blue screen doing some fairly difficult gymnastics, and we composited her into the geyser as well.
We basically were capturing a phenomenon that's totally real, but has never been witnessed by any living soul, because nobody's been down there with a camera to film a blowout. Randy Edelman wrote the score for Daylight, and as usual with Randy, he rose to the occasion. He wrote a very powerful, tense score that also had some beautiful, absolutely amazing melodic cues in it.
There are certain scenes in Daylight that I think, I know what he's going to want without even speaking to him, and I think that's nice that you develop that kind of musical and creative shorthand, and then it's wonderful because then you'll think something and he'll do completely opposite, and that's what keeps you on your toes, and that's because he's a bright, creative, person.
Well, I'm very proud of the picture. I think the picture turned out really well, and it's exactly what we set out to do. You always learn on every movie. You learn. I mean, every day on every movie you learn something.
Everybody wants to survive. But how do you survive? You can't survive alone. And we realize that only with this esprit de corps, this coming together, this homogenizing of the group, will we make it.
Survival in the third millennium after the year 2000 is going to come from community. Communities are going to have to solve the problems we have. And this world is like the tunnel. It's bigger than a tunnel, but the principle remains the same. We have to save ourselves. We have to participate, and we have to sort of, reach across the breach to each other to make the community that will be the instrument of survival as this world goes on, or this world won't see human beings populating the planet in the year 3000. And that was my metaphor. That's what Daylight meant to me.
I think I'll ride with you.
One condition.
What's that?
We gotta take the bridge.